Well, this flows together. Sarah, you read last week. Also, we were in the lower parking lot. Anyone can read, by the way. You are exceptional at it, but anyone can do this. It flows together because these two stories connect. You remember the story from last week, the story of the prodigal son. Everybody knows this story. The father has two sons, and the younger son says, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance." And this younger son goes off to a distant land, and he blows all the money on dissolute living, gambling, or women, or whiskey, but it's not good. And some time passes, and he's desperate. He sees pigs feeding by the side of the road, and he just longs to taste the slop that they get. And he thinks, at my father's estate, there were all of these servants, and none of them lacked for food. I'll just go back to my father's house. I'll ask for forgiveness. I'll tell him I'm not worthy to be called his son, and he'll give me a job. Meanwhile, the father at this big estate misses his son. And let us imagine that every night he looks out the front window. Every night the son doesn't come home. But it just so happens that this evening, the son makes it up that great hill where the estate is finally visible, and the father sees him, and he runs out the door. And before the son can even offer his apology, the father puts his finest robe on the son's shoulders, a ring upon his fingers, sandals on his feet. He says, "We're having a party because this son of mine was dead, and now he lives. He was lost and is now found." What a story. The story of the prodigal son. I knew this story growing up, but I never heard the word prodigal used outside of this story, so I just assumed that the word prodigal meant lost, because this son of mine was lost, and now he's found. I don't think I learned what prodigal meant, because the implications of that meaning would have been so grave. You see, prodigal stands for one of the 7 deadly sins in my book. It's nearly unforgivable. Do you know what prodigal means? It means wasteful, extravagant, the wasteful son. We did not waste things when I was growing up. We drank orange juice from concentrate, those little orange bricks that you put in the freezer. And then when we'd make juice, we'd put double the amount of water in to really stretch it out. The first time I tasted bottled orange juice, it was like the world was just opening up. Most of our things were secondhand. They were nice looking. I don't think people could tell, but they were secondhand. And I would drive around with my mom, and sometimes she'd see a piece of furniture on the side of the road, and we would stop and get it. I have actual memories of digging through dumpsters for things that ended up in our home. And growing up, our Christian identity was kind of everything. So all of our side tendencies we included in this Christian identity. So I thought, the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus says, "One man's trash is another man's treasure." The point is that wastefulness was just anathema to us. And when I would be in the dumpster cleaning off these items that were about to become beautiful, I would shake my head at whomever had put it there. How awful, how terrible, how wasteful. Their loss was our grace. So however much I want to ignore it, the fact is, the story of the prodigal son is a story about how little God cares about what we waste. So I'm thinking, when I read the prodigal son, I'm thinking, you idiot, you blew everything. But God is saying, it's okay. Come here. You're here. I was thinking about this because, again, our story today comes right after the story of the prodigal son. That story ends and then this parable begins. And it's another parable about extravagant wealth kind of going to waste. In the story, a rich man has an employee, someone who does things for him, because that's what you do when you're established. You have people who do things for you. But the problem is, this employee is very incompetent. He is always losing his keys or missing meetings or not replying to email. And the boss did not get to that position in life by abiding with incompetence. He's an exacting, precise, sharp man who cares about accountability. So he calls this employee forward and he says, "This is it. You're done." Now the manager, the employee, for all of his practical incompetence, he's not a dummy. So he thinks, what am I going to do? I'm too old for blue-collar work. I'm too dumb for white-collar work. I have 2 kids in college. What am I going to do? So before his boss cuts off access to all the accounts, he makes a few calls and ingratiates himself to some other people so that he'll be okay after he gets cut. And he does this all without his boss's blessing, and it's all to his own benefit. And this is what Jesus holds up before us today as an example. It's very suspect. Additionally surprising is that the boss in this story, the owner, he even commends the manager or the employee for what he's done. Probably reminds him of why he hired him in the first place. Once upon a time, I knew he could do something, and now he's shown it. The word that we see in our text comes from a Greek word called phronimos. That word translates in English as prudent or shrewd or wise. And the master's commendation, the owner's commendation, is Jesus' commendation too. He pivots to his audience and he says that the children of this age, maybe the people out there, are more phronimos than the children of light. I don't know who the children of light are, but I wonder if they might be rosy-cheeked churchgoers like ourselves, people who always sit in the same pews and do things the same way. The children of this age are more phronimos. So last week, we had the parable of the prodigal, wasteful son, and this week we have the parable of the prodigal, wasteful servant. And I think both of these stories are perplexing to those of us who are very concerned with rules, and order, and precision, and fairness, and nothing going to waste. Because in the story of the prodigal son, the son gets a hug from the father he's disowned. And in the story of the prodigal servant, he gets a high five from the boss he swindled. So what is going on with these stories? Another phrase that you maybe noticed in the text translates as dishonest wealth. If you were taking a Greek class in divinity school, your professor would say it in the Greek and she'd say, ton mamona tes adakias, literally the mammon of unrighteousness. Dishonest wealth. Mammon is money or property or material wealth. So it's a little troubling that Jesus is calling this unrighteous or dishonest, because we know about money, and sometimes people get money through dishonest, unrighteous means, maybe by preying upon the vulnerabilities or the addictions of other people. But sometimes people achieve great wealth and they deserve every penny, because they're hardworking, they have great ideas, they're generous, So it's a little hard to deal with this designation of wealth as dishonest or unrighteous. And it's especially perplexing because the rich man in this story, the boss, the owner, is a stand-in for God. So we would assume that the money that he has must be righteous and good and worthy of adoration. But dishonest wealth is the phrase. Unrighteous money. And then at the end of the reading, there is this. If you haven't been faithful with dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you true riches? Now, maybe we're still hung up on the phrase dishonest wealth because you're all honest people. So I think we need to do a little bit more work of translation. Have you ever heard someone just remark, it's just money, who cares? I think that's kind of what God is getting at here. Money is not holy. It is not righteous. It's just money. And it's how we use it or what results from money that God and Jesus care most about. And Jesus is ever aware of the traps of money. So if we can get over our discomfort with these two stories, the wastefulness of the prodigal son, the wastefulness of the prodigal servant, and I think we should be able to get over it because the father gets over it, the boss gets over it, God gets over it. We can imagine what might be the result if we look at money and say, it's just money. I imagine the manager in this story, the servant, walking into a restaurant and declaring to every person there, my boss has got the bill. Don't worry about it. I imagine him knocking on the door of a high-rise apartment. Each person answers, next month's rent, don't worry about it. My boss has got it taken care of. I imagine the manager walking up a hill in a tony lakeside suburban community to a church that is beautifully located and announcing to the people there that it would be a whole lot more lucrative if this piece of property was bulldozed and condos were built. But my boss has said that you ought to get together every week and praise God. Not a good use of money in any case, but the people at the restaurant, the people in the apartment, the people at the church sit together and we rejoice. And the boss, God, shakes his head and smiles at all of this. Good for you, he says. Good job, dishonest manager. So God isn't interested in the usual approaches we have to money. And God knows how dangerous money can be. God's interested in what comes out of money. And I think back to the dumpsters that I used to dig through for neglected treasures, and how they appeared in front of houses that I wished I lived in. And as I've gotten older, I've heard countless stories of heartbreak, resentment, broken relationships that would have been averted if whomever lived in that house took the $50 million that the kids were arguing over and threw it in the dumpster. It's just money. Remember at the beginning of the story of the prodigal son, the son and the father had this terse contractual exchange. The son goes up to his dad and says, "Pops, Split it down the middle. I want my inheritance. And the father gives it to him, and the son goes on his way, and it doesn't say anything that happened before they parted for that last time. I don't imagine them hugging. I just imagine him stomping down the road with all that money. But at the end of that story, when this wasteful son comes home without a penny to his name, and his father greets him, and his net worth is half of what it was at the beginning of the story, this is the moment when the two of them finally embrace. Money well spent.